Have you ever wondered if there's a part of you that knows things your conscious mind cannot yet grasp? That perhaps your psyche, your very soul, is already communicating truths about your existence that you've been too distracted to hear? I am Carl Jung, and in my decades of working with the human unconscious, I have witnessed something extraordinary. I have seen the soul preparing itself, organizing itself, sending unmistakable signals that transcend the boundaries of what we call life and death. What I am about to share with you comes not from books or theories alone, but from my own direct experiences, from my patients, from the depths of the collective unconscious itself. These are the 5 omens that reveal when your soul has already begun its preparation for the afterlife. And before you dismiss this as morbid or frightening, let me tell you clearly, it is neither. It is about wholeness, it is about individuation, it is about your psyche finally recognizing its eternal nature. Many of my patients came to me in states of profound confusion. They would tell me they felt different, changed, as though something fundamental had shifted within them. They couldn't name it, they couldn't explain it, but they knew with absolute certainty that they were not the same person they were months or years before. And I would listen, truly listen, because I understood what was happening. Their souls were speaking. Their psyche was undergoing a transformation that their rational minds struggled to comprehend. These 5 omens do not announce themselves with trumpets or fanfare. They emerge quietly, subtly, like dawn breaking over distant mountains. Some experience all of them, others only recognize a few, but they share one undeniable quality. They are messages from the self, the deepest center of your being, preparing you for a transition that goes beyond the physical realm. And I must be clear about something from the very beginning. These omens do not mean your death is imminent. That is not what I am saying. What I am describing is a psychological and spiritual preparation, a process of the psyche integrating itself, completing its work, preparing for transformation. Think of it as the soul doing what it has always known how to do, organizing itself toward wholeness, toward its ultimate return to the collective unconscious from which it emerged. The first omen manifests in your dreams, but these are not ordinary dreams. I discovered this pattern repeatedly in my analytical work. My patients would come to me describing encounters with the dead, vivid, powerful, undeniable, and I recognized immediately what was happening. The barrier between the conscious and the unconscious was thinning. The psyche was opening doorways. In my own life, after my near-death experience in 1944, I began having visions that defied all rational explanation. I saw my deceased friends and patients. I communed with figures from the collective unconscious, and I understood with crystalline clarity that death is not an ending, but a transformation of consciousness. The psyche continues, the soul persists. When your soul begins preparing for the afterlife, it naturally attunes itself to what I call the psychoid realm, that mysterious dimension where matter and psyche intersect, where the living and the dead communicate through symbols, through dreams, through synchronicities. You begin dreaming of those who have passed, but these dreams carry a different quality. They feel more real than waking life itself. Pay attention to how the deceased appear in these dreams. They often manifest in states of peace, of wholeness, of what I would call psychological completion. They are not trapped. They are not suffering. They appear as archetypes of the integrated self, showing you what awaits on the other side of the veil. This is not wishful thinking. This is the psyche preparing you, showing you that consciousness transcends the physical body. I remember one patient who came to me terrified because she was dreaming of her mother every night. Her mother had died 5 years prior, but suddenly the dreams became intense, frequent, overwhelmingly real. I explained to her that this was not something to fear. Her soul was establishing contact with the ancestral realm. Her psyche was preparing for its own eventual transition by dissolving the artificial barrier between life and death. The frequency intensifies. That is the key. If you dreamed of the deceased once in a great while, but now you dream of them weekly, nightly, multiple times in succession, your psyche is actively working on something profound. It is integrating the reality of death into your consciousness. It is showing you that the soul continues, that love persists, that consciousness is eternal. When you awaken from these dreams, notice the sensation sensation that remains? Does it dissolve quickly like normal dreams, or does it linger, wrapping around you like a presence throughout the day? That lingering quality is the hallmark of genuine contact with the collective unconscious, with the realm beyond the personal ego. Your soul is doing this for a specific purpose. It is preparing you emotionally and psychologically for your own transition. It is proving to you through direct experience, not intellectual theory, that death is not annihilation, but transformation. And I can tell you from my own journey through the unconscious, this knowledge changes everything. The second omen is one I observed countless times in my practice, and I lived it myself. Suddenly, inexplicably, the material world loses its grip on you. The things that once consumed your attention, your ambition, your very identity, they simply cease to matter. And this is not depression, this is liberation. I call this the process of detachment from the persona. The persona, as I have written extensively, is the mask we wear, the social role we play, the identity constructed from external achievements and possessions. But when the soul begins preparing for the afterlife, it instinctively withdraws energy from the persona. It knows something the ego refuses to accept. You cannot take any of it with you. My patients would describe this to me with bewilderment. Dr. Jung, I worked my entire life for this promotion, and now that I have it, I feel nothing. The car I dreamed of owning sits in my driveway, and I barely notice it. The social status I fought for seems hollow, meaningless. And I would smile because I recognize the soul's wisdom at work. This detachment is not about becoming irresponsible or abandoning your duties. It is about fundamentally shifting your relationship with the material world. You continue to function, to work, to participate, but you are no longer identified with these external forms. You recognize them for what they are, temporary expressions, not your true essence. When I went through my own confrontation with the unconscious, I lost all interest in my professional reputation, in my position in society, in the accumulation of recognition. What mattered to me was the inner work, the exploration of the psyche, the pursuit of psychological truth. Everything else became secondary, almost irrelevant. Your soul initiates this detachment because it is preparing to shed the heaviest burden of all, identification with the material realm. It is teaching you experientially that you are not your possessions, not your achievements, not your social role. You are consciousness itself, temporarily inhabiting a physical form, and that form's attachments cannot follow you beyond the threshold of death. Along with this detachment comes something remarkable. You begin spontaneously resolving practical matters. You organize documents, you settle debts, you return borrowed items, you create order in your external life. This is not conscious planning. It is the soul's instinct to complete unfinished business, to leave things in proper order before the great departure. Many people resist this process. They fear losing their identity, their sense of self, constructed over decades. But I discovered through my work with the unconscious that what you lose is not your true self. What you lose is the false self, the ego's illusions, the persona's mask. And what remains is something far more valuable, your authentic being, your eternal soul, your connection to the self. If you are experiencing this great detachment, do not fight it, surrender to it. Your psyche knows what it is doing. It is freeing you from the chains that bind consciousness to matter, preparing you for the next stage of your soul's journey. The third omen is perhaps the most profound. It is a deep, unshakable knowing that you have completed what you came here to do. I call this the completion of the Opus, the great work of individuation. And when this feeling arises, it transforms everything. In my years of analytical psychology, I worked with countless individuals seeking meaning, purpose, direction, but occasionally I would encounter someone who had reached a different stage entirely. They carried a sense of wholeness, of completion, of what I termed psychological integration. The warring parts of their psyche had been reconciled. The shadow had been integrated. The anima or animus had been recognized. The self had emerged. This is not arrogance. It is not the ego claiming victory. It is something far more subtle and profound. It is the soul recognizing that its primary work in this incarnation is complete. The lessons have been learned. The karma, if you will, has been resolved. The psychological development that was meant to occur has occurred. I experienced this myself in my later years. After decades of exploring the unconscious, after writing my major works, after helping countless patients toward wholeness, I felt a deep peace settle over me. Not the peace of retirement or exhaustion, but the peace of completion. My opus was done, not in the sense that I stopped working, but in the sense that I had fulfilled my soul's purpose. Along with this completion comes spontaneous reconciliation. Old resentments dissolve without effort. You find yourself forgiving people you swore you could never forgive. Relationships that ended badly suddenly resolve themselves. You feel compassion for everyone who passed through your life, even those who wounded you deeply. This is the psyche's way of untying karmic knots, of clearing energetic debts, of achieving what I call psychological redemption. Let me give you an example from my own life. There were colleagues who opposed my work, who criticized my theories, who worked against me professionally. For years, I carried anger, frustration, defensiveness. But as I moved toward individuation, as my soul completed its work, all of that simply evaporated. I saw their opposition as part of the great tapestry, necessary tensions that pushed me to refine my thinking, to go deeper into the unconscious. You begin to see your entire life from the perspective of the self rather than the ego. From the ego's viewpoint, life appears as random events, some good, some bad, some meaningless. But from the self's perspective, you see the pattern, the purpose, the perfection of the whole design. Every struggle taught something. Every loss redirected you. Every pain deepened you. This sense of completion brings extraordinary freedom. You stop living in survival mode and begin living in being mode. You stop seeking external validation and simply exist. You stop worrying about what you haven't accomplished and celebrate the wholeness of what you have lived. This is individuation's gift, the integration of all aspects of the psyche into a unified, complete self. Many people fear this omen. They think completion means death is imminent, but I tell you it means you have finished the required curriculum. Everything from this point forward is grace, bonus, the freedom to live without the burden of psychological incompletion. And paradoxically, this is when life becomes most rich, most present, most fully lived. The fourth omen manifests as a radical shift in your experience of time. Days blend together, months vanish, years pass like moments, or the opposite occurs. A single conversation stretches into eternity. A sunset lasts forever. Time becomes fluid, malleable, ultimately unreal. I discovered this phenomenon during my own explorations of the unconscious. In active imagination, in deep meditation, in moments of synchronicity, time as we know it simply ceased to exist. Past, present, and future collapsed into an eternal now. And I realized that time as we experience it is a construct of ego consciousness, necessary for navigating physical reality, but ultimately illusory. When your soul begins preparing for the afterlife, it naturally starts releasing its attachment to linear time. It knows something crucial. In the realm beyond physical death, in what I call the collective unconscious or the psychoid dimension, time does not function as it does here. Everything exists simultaneously. Past lives, future possibilities, all of it accessible in the eternal present. Your psyche is preparing you for this by gradually dissolving your rigid relationship with time. You begin experiencing what the mystics call kairos, sacred time, as opposed to chronos, linear time. You lose interest in long-term planning. 5-year plans seem absurd. Retirement calculations feel irrelevant, not because you're being irresponsible, but because your soul knows that the only moment that truly exists is now. I remember when this began happening to me, I would sit down to write, and hours would pass in what felt like minutes, or I would have a brief conversation with a patient, and the clock would show that an hour had elapsed, though it seemed like only moments. Time was revealing its true nature, relative, subjective, ultimately transcendable. This shift brings with it a profound presence. You stop postponing happiness. You stop living for future rewards. You stop torturing yourself with past regrets. You are here, fully here, for the first time in your life. And paradoxically, this makes each moment infinitely rich, infinitely meaningful. Many of my patients describe this as disorienting. They would miss appointments, forget what day it was, feel unmoored from the temporal structure that had always organized their lives. And I would reassure them, this is not deterioration, this is evolution. Your psyche is transcending one of the deepest illusions of physical existence. The fifth and final omen is what I call the opening of the third eye, though you might also call it the activation of the transcendent function. Your consciousness begins expanding beyond the boundaries of your individual ego. You have experiences of unity, of cosmic connection, of what the mystics describe as union with the divine. These experiences came to me unbidden during my confrontation with the unconscious. Suddenly, I was no longer just Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist. I was consciousness itself, experiencing the universe through this particular focal point. The boundaries dissolved. I felt my connection to every living thing, to the stars, to the very fabric of existence itself. When your soul prepares for the afterlife, these experiences intensify and multiply. You might be washing dishes when suddenly you merge with everything, walking in nature when the separation between you and the trees disappears, lying in bed when you expand beyond your body and touch infinity. These are not hallucinations. They are the psyche practicing for the moment when individual consciousness returns to the collective unconscious from which it emerged. Along with these expansions come what I termed synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that reveal the deep interconnectedness of all things. You think of someone they call. You need information, it appears. You wonder about something, the universe answers. This is your psyche operating at a higher frequency beyond the limitations of cause and effect, in the realm of what I call the psychoid, where matter and mind interpenetrate. I documented hundreds of synchronicities by now. They were not random. They were the psyche's way of showing me that consciousness extends far beyond the individual ego, that we are all connected through the collective unconscious, that the universe itself is alive, responsive, meaningful. These experiences often come with downloads of information, sudden knowing without learning, insights that arrive fully formed. You understand complex spiritual concepts you never studied. You remember things that feel like past lives. You access wisdom that seems to come from beyond your personal history. This is the collective unconscious speaking, the ancestral wisdom flowing through you. Your soul shows you these expansions for a reason. It is preparing you for an existence without the limitations of a physical body, without the constraints of time and space, without the illusion of separation. It is giving you glimpses of your true nature as eternal consciousness, temporarily individualized, soon to return to the infinite. So now you know the 5 omens. You recognize that your soul is undergoing profound preparation. The question becomes, what do you do with this knowledge? How do you respond to what your psyche is showing you? First, surrender to the process. Do not resist what is happening. Your soul knows far more than your conscious mind. Trust the wisdom of the self. This is individuation's final stage. The ego learning to serve the greater wholeness rather than fighting for supremacy. Second, engage in active imagination. Dialogue with your unconscious. Write down your dreams. Pay attention to symbols. Create art that expresses what words cannot. Give your soul a voice, a channel through which to communicate its wisdom. Third, complete your unfinished business. Make the reconciliations. Speak the truths. Resolve the conflicts. Your psyche is showing you what needs to be cleared before you can move forward, whether that's tomorrow or decades from now. Fourth, embrace the eternal now. Stop living in past regrets or future anxieties. Be here, fully present, fully alive. This is what your soul is teaching you, that all of life exists in this sacred moment. We have reached the end of this exploration, but truthfully it is not an end. It is a beginning. You now understand the 5 omens that reveal your soul's preparation for the afterlife. You know these are not omens of doom, but omens of awakening, of individuation, of the psyche completing its work toward wholeness. Your soul is not preparing for death. It is preparing for transformation, for the continuation of consciousness beyond physical form, for return to the collective unconscious that is your true home. Death is not the end, it is metamorphosis. The psyche continues, the soul persists, only the form changes, but the essence, the consciousness, the self, that is eternal.